And greetings to everybody as you arrive through this wonder of Zoom technology. I still get really kind of excited by this when I see these people's names ping up in front. Welcome to the PPMA webinar, Sparkle and Learn series for autumn. So we're going to do a bit of sparkling today with the fabulous Hazel Anderson Turner from Anderson Turner, who's going to be sharing with us some of her experiences over the COVID period and lockdown while she's been working very much with colleagues, particularly in frontline NHS Trust across the Southeast. And it's amazing in terms of the experience that we're going to hear from Hazel. So very warm welcome, Hazel, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. No, it's great to be here.
Cool. And good, yeah, it's good to see so many different faces and different names who've tuned in today. So thank you also for taking your time. And this will be available on demand as well, so you can access it from the PPMA website once we've finished. So Hazel, what I like to do with all of my guests when they arrive is just to see what's been going on for you over the past months of this year through this experience, this really strange experience. What's emerged from your own kind of experience that's been good or bad, challenging or inspirational that you've seen happen?
So I think the biggest challenge for me was homeschooling. So I have a 5-year-old daughter, and yeah, I love learning, I love books, I love reading, and yet, yeah, trying to teach her was, yeah, I discovered that my patience was even lower than I thought it was. But I guess, so one of my wins has been, so I'm a person who is very much kind of always on the go, and I started meditating at the start of the year, and actually this time has given me, because I'm traveling so much less, the opportunity to really establish that practice and really develop that side, which has been, I think, invaluable and has opened up so much to me. So yeah, that's been my win, I think.
And what have you seen kind of emerging from that meditation practice that you've started?
Oh, wow. I guess a lot. That ability to slow down. I think meditation is amazing as well. So in my work with clients, I talk a lot about the ability to switch out of our thoughts and to notice when we're getting into spirals. And, you know, at its very I don't know, basic level, that's what meditation is brilliant at, that skill of and building that strength of being able to do that. But it's been a deeper spiritual thing as well. I think connecting with what is really important and having that space to connect to the me underneath all of the things that I've achieved and the box that I've ticked. It's really developed that feeling, that sense of being a human being, not just a human doing. So yeah.
I love it. I think that in itself could be another webinar for us in terms of talking and exploring that. I don't know whether you know, but we've been running a daily mindfulness session for PPMA members since March, and it's been amazing in terms of the feedback that we've had from colleagues and friends who've been joining that series and the impact it's had when they've been able to build this into part of their daily routine. But sadly today, that's not what we're going to be talking about. So share with us, Hazel, something about your background and experience and what's brought you here today.
So I used to work at Hampshire County Council. So I joined in my late 20s and worked my way up to become head of workforce development across. We joined fire and police, a shared service. So I led that element. So public service is really kind of in my bones. I feel very passionate about it. And then when I started my own business nearly 4 years ago, I've continued to work with fire services and with the NHS. So that value of service and working with organisations that share that value is really, really important to me.
That's great stuff. And over the past months, you've been leading a pool of coaches providing resilience coaching to NHS trusts. And how did that come about? What led to that piece of work?
So I've been working with NHS Trust for several years. And then when COVID hit, so in early March, they asked if I'd be able to bring together a pool of coaches who were experienced and specialised in resilience. So looking for something that wasn't counselling support, obviously that was available, but a place where people could call up and have a space to just offload some of the emotional impact and then get some, I guess, work together around their resilience. So slightly different to my normal coaching contracts, which are very much leadership based. It was much more about, okay, so this is a space where I can talk about me, I can talk about the impact that this is having on me, and just have that space that I can work through this and help them. So it was whereas my traditional coaching contracts are very much kind of a monthly check-in, we're working over a big kind of leadership challenge. This was generally weekly or every 2 weekly, much more about, I guess, that someone walking alongside you as you're working your way through the challenges that the NHS staff were facing.
So in this space, what was the definition that sat behind the term resilience? What is it that you're trying to get at?
Oh, so yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think resilience can get a bit of a bad rap. So I really don't buy into the idea of resilience being about kind of toughening up and just, digging deep. This idea, kind of that grit element of it, like we just need to, it's on your shoulders, and if you were just stronger, if that resilience on yourself. The definition of resilience from the place that I come from is about flexibility. So my training is around acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, which is kind of the next wave of cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's in the same kind of family as that. And its aim is to develop this flexibility. So it's about, as life's challenges come to us, which they do, instead of that kind of just gripping tighter and pushing through, we hold it a bit more lightly. We feel much more confident in our ability to be able to step back when challenges come and to actively choose what happens next, rather than feeling like we're just constantly being battered and we're having to keep, coming up. So I'm not kind of from the bounce back, this constant bouncing back. It's actually instead, well, let's build that ability to flex and build that kind of strength rather than this toughness.
Yeah, I mean, I often have great skepticism when I see phrases like, you need to be resilient built into, job packs and adverts, because, for me, that's often shorthand for we just want you to work harder, longer, and perhaps take a little bit of advantage of you. The life is absolutely full of challenges, and that's part, certainly in a leadership world, that you've got to be able to accommodate, as you say, but being able to do that flexibly in a way that is a much lighter touch. It's a very different world from just this relentlessness of unreasonable expectations, I think, which can often see itself rise. And wind back to the beginning of this period of before lockdown started, we had the highest level of burnout that had ever been recorded in the NHS and public sector. High levels of sickness absence, huge amount of people who are feeling as their expectations were too much in terms of their job load. So none of that has gone away through COVID. The headlines of the challenges that organizations like the NHS and other parts of public service have faced have perhaps started to dominate. So what have you been seeing kind of emerging through this time around the sense of people being overwhelmed and burnout?
So I think one of the themes that's definitely come out is that the challenges that people are bringing to coaching are not new challenges.
Yeah.
The feeling that I got very early on was that many of the people that I was working with had been very good at just that whole like, let's just push through. I'm on this, the treadmill of high demands, and I'm just going to keep going, and I've got all the life stuff going on as well. And there was no time for themselves at all. And I think COVID really raised that awareness, because for many people, those old ways of coping no longer worked. So it was all the same stuff, but suddenly it was actually an awareness that I need to be looking at this in a different way. And that awareness of the impact of not making any time for your own self-care, for yourself, I think was just brought to the surface. And for many of the coachees, that first step was, okay, we need to work together to find a bit of space, to find that time for you to get off of the treadmill, to be able to take a bit of a step back and think about what is really important. Where do I need to start putting in some boundaries? What does self-care or self-kindness look like for me? I think a lot of people realize that they were just, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about, and I talk a lot in my work about going into survival mode. I would say we were in survival mode before COVID hit. So we were in this relentless, just keep going, just keep focused on what's in front of you. Don't stop and think about it, because that's just too much. So I think we were in a level of survival mode beforehand, and then suddenly it was like, oh my god, this is actually this really is this kind of survival crisis. And so I think people going into it were already tired. And it just was, it then tipped over to say, okay, the old ways aren't going to work. We have to find a new way of being. And I think that's why people have been wanting to hear from psychologists like myself, because I think there is this recognition that maybe what we were doing before wasn't okay, wasn't working for us. And maybe one of the positives of this situation is that we have questioned some really deep kind of automatic functioning, automatic conditioning about how we live our lives.
One of the great things I've heard you talk about is when we're trying to think clearly, when we're in survival mode, it's a bit like wading through treacle. So what is it that you've been doing to help your coachees come out of the treacle and be able to think a little bit clearer?
So I think the first thing that is helpful for my clients is to recognize that survival mode is really, really normal, is the body trying, or the mind trying to keep us safe. And there's something about, maybe I normally work with people to get to the point of saying, actually, thank you mind for trying to keep me safe, but actually there is no immediate threat in front of me, so let's try and break out of that. I think when you're in a place of your amygdala, that threat detection center in your limbic system kind of firing off, when you're in that place of fight or flight, understandably you become incredibly tunnel vision. You become really, really focused on just what's in front of you, which can feel really, that's where the fog comes from, I think, where we're really kind of like, oh, panic, this is the heart rate's going, you really tense up in your body. So this mind body connection, and one of the most helpful things that you can do is to do something that you wouldn't do in a threat situation. So you wouldn't start breathing deeply. So working with clients around, maybe something like the box breathing. So 4 breaths in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, or that kind of extending the outward breath. And then other things that we wouldn't do if we were under a threat in front of us. So laughing, having a chat with a friend. And there's something for me about breaking state. So I use walking a lot. So there's something about movement that gets the hormones moving through the body, but just getting outside, changing that place that you're in, going and grabbing a cup of tea. And I think really pulling in that mind body connection, because the feeling of survival mode starts in your body. So if you were experiencing a threat in front of you, that, you know, that heart rate, that tension, that goosebump, you know, whatever's happening is coming from your body. Your body is signaling, you know, that there's a danger ahead. And so it's using, rather than we think that we can outthink our body. So it's there going, there is nothing to be scared about. And you kind of have this internal dialogue, but actually you can more quickly change what's happening in your body by working with your body. So finding ways to relax yourself. And so one of the tips that I have is to build in, using the psychology of habits, is to build in habits that connect you back into your body during the day. So things like when you're washing your hands after going to the bathroom, using that time to really connect with maybe the sound of the water, connecting into the smell of the soap. So creating a little mindful moment. Or maybe when you're making a cup of tea, instead of like looking at the phone or, you know, trying to do something productive, just spending that few minutes, just taking some deep breaths and saying, how am I feeling?
Yeah.
How am I feeling? Just connecting in.
I mean, I love all of those ideas because they're so accessible for everybody. They're so readily available. And of course, it's all about then choice, isn't it? And part of the experience that I'm seeing is that often our senior leaders will say, yeah, they're great ideas and fantastic, and apply to probably everybody else but themselves. Because I don't know whether that's just because it sounds too simplistic that this can make a difference, or I don't need to, you know, in this concept of being a superhero as a leader. So what are you saying in terms of the world of senior leaders absorb, you know, taking this kind of well-being and self-care and compassion, which is accessible to everybody on board? What are you experiencing around that?
I think there's a mix, as there always is.
Mm.
But I think it is an ongoing challenge. So I see people who absolutely, you know, fundamentally believe in and would support their teams to do all of those things to stay well and to stay resilient. And yet, like you say yourself, it's like, but I need to be more than, I need to, I don't know, that I think it comes from that desire to support others. And when the penny finally does drop, that, a bit like when you're parenting children, and God, they can spot it, can't they? When you say one thing and then do another, like they will call you up on it. And it's weird because we forget that when we're working with other adults. But that is so incredibly powerful. And I yeah, I think if leaders really realize the effect that has, to say, look, you know, this is what it looks like to lead, is to show yourself love and compassion and respect, and we can still together achieve what we need to achieve and still look after ourselves. But you have to believe that. And I think fundamentally there's still a belief that, in that work hard belief that we share, which is, I don't know, there's always something more we could do. There's always something more important than ourselves.
Yes.
And because people are led by their purpose of making a difference, that takes over.
It connects very much for me with something you were talking about earlier, which is not about being strong, but about being flexible, which is really at the heart of often what you're promoting, from what I see of your work, Hazel. So how do you go about encouraging people to kind of shift in that way? Because it's a real challenge, isn't it? I mean, it sounds so simple in terms of the set of words, but in this behavioral stuff, moving into this narrative we've got in our heads of what we think we should be doing versus what we know we should be doing is a hugely challenging task for both coaches and coachees. How do you go about doing that?
So values for me are the way that we get to that. So for me, values are the most helpful thing that can take us from being doings to being beings. And when I'm working with leaders and staff around values, we start to shift. So we're saying, okay, how do I show up in a way that demonstrates compassion? How am I going to approach this challenge in a way that represents empathy or creativity? So it's starting to get out of that mode of I need to achieve lots of goals and I need to tick all of these things. We get so focused on getting things ticked off that actually for leaders in particular, what they bring is a quality of being. And it's that makes the difference. So yeah, it's great that we achieve stuff and we get stuff done, but it's the how. And that requires, I think, you to see the value in yourself. And often, understandably, people's value is being that they're kind of farming their value out to their status, or how many people they've helped, or it's kind of like I'm of value, or I'm of worth because I've done this for other people, or I've achieved this thing. And a lot of my work is actually seeing, do you know what, when you're sat there, and this is how meditation helps, when you're sat there and you're not achieving anything, you're not helping anyone, but you have value just being you. And I think that's where, for me, we start to see that shift in, okay, that's where a real confidence to be able to say, right, this behavior, isn't helping me. And this behavior is who I want to be. And I'm making choices every day. So all those little choices that we make all the time about where we put our energy, how we show up, what we do, it's those little choices that add up to make the difference about how we relate to ourselves in the world.
And it's such inspirational language that you use in there, and it's very kind of it's very different. It's a very different landscape that you're trying to get people to put into their heads. Now, I describe it as we often live in these disembodied fairy tales in our mind, and certainly stilling that and calming that down and providing space for ourselves to process what's going on is really challenging. So what have you seen in terms of people's abilities to kind of make space for enabling this kind of processing to take place, if at all, if they've managed to do it? I don't know, maybe that's maybe work in progress, I don't know.
It's interesting, actually. So I spent I think a lot of the early coaching was focused on that. How can I create some space to recover? So just even having space to go for a walk, particularly when people had children at home as well, and there was a lot of kind of role mix going on, but just creating a bit of time, whether it's having a bath, all those traditional things or people meditating, doing some yoga. It was very focused early on those recovery activities. What's really interesting now is, as fatigue is it's still there, that I don't want to say this kind of boredom with the situation, but this kind of like, oh, this heaviness, we're still doing this. I was able to ramp myself up and get through this crisis, but now you're expecting me to go on and keep going. What I'm working with clients now is actually, yeah, I've managed to achieve that getting out for a walk a day, and I'm able to process what's going on. But now I also need something to lift my spirits. And that's been really fascinating. So we moved out of our old survival mode into a new survival mode. And now we're saying, actually, do you know what? We could be here a while. I need my recovery processing habits, but I also need some joy. So I'm seeing people going, do you know what? I'm gonna think about the few months ahead, and I need to make sure that I am seeing my friends. So again, we come back to values. I am going to make sure that I'm going to do something creative. I'm going to, just while I can, go out and do some of that fun stuff. So that's been really fascinating, actually. This recognition that we really need to make time for the recovery stuff that keeps us well, but that's not a full life.
Yeah.
We also need that balance of the spirit lifting as well. And yeah, so that's at the moment, that's really fascinating, seeing that going on and supporting clients with you know, getting used to and thriving in some way in this new environment.
Yeah, I love that expression of the spirit lifting. And we've had a comment in from Alga. Thanks for posting that, Alga, who's really, supporting what you're saying about that focus on purpose and values with intention, and how powerful it is, and how meaningful that can be. So it's good to hear that others are equally kind of in support of it, and it's great to kind of just be able to share a very different message, to our community, and show that this style of coaching, particularly when we're talking about resilience, and especially for leaders at this time, because it's going to get tougher over coming months rather than easier. And many of our membership, are right out there in the front of kind of supporting their local communities, creating space for this kind of dialogue to be able to happen. It's fantastic. So we're really thankful for the work that you've been doing, the focus in NHS, but I know you work right across public sector as well. And thank you so much for joining us today, Hazel, and sharing those beautiful highlights of the work that you do. It's fantastic work. It's really inspirational stuff. And thank you so much for giving your time.
You're welcome.
So everybody out there, on behalf of PPMA, thank you for joining. Hazel has written a really fantastic little blog to go with this broadcast, so you can catch that. And it gives the headlines and the takeaways of what we've covered and summarizes it. And all of Hazel's contact details if you want to find out more about her work and the method of ACT, which I think is great. It's a really interesting approach to get your head around, is well worth checking out. So feel free to contact Hazel. And we'll also, as I said at the beginning of the program, have this available on download for members who weren't able to join us today, or if you want to listen to it again. We'll push out this link to remind everybody that we have a daily practice, a mindful practice that you can join as PPMA members for free. That's on every weekday, Monday to Friday at 8:30 for half an hour. So anyone who wishes to make use of that, please do so. And we've got a great series coming up through November of new Sparkle and Learn programs. But one in particular that I'm just going to give you the insider info on, because we haven't promoted this, but it's a special kind of masterclass program that we're doing. It's an hour and a half. It's going to be on Friday, the 20th of November at 3 o'clock, and it's called Free Your Inner Alice. And I've been on this workshop, which is why I brought it into PPMA land. And it's a company who uses the metaphors in Alice in Wonderland to bring about conversations around organizational change and development. They're really fantastic. And places are limited to 21. So if it's something of interest, watch out for that coming through from the PPMA office, and reserve your space as soon as possible, I recommend, because I know it's going to be really, really popular. So on behalf of us all here in the PPMA office, thank you for joining. Thank you to our sponsors as ever for enabling us to bring these programs to you. A huge thank you, Hazel, for joining and giving us your time, and best of luck in everything that you're doing. And I'm sure that we'll have you back in not too distant future for the follow-up program, especially finding out that stuff around your mindful practice too. And goodbye to everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Stay well and stay safe, and see you soon. Thanks a lot.